Hey everybody, welcome back to Improv Town. I am your host and ambassador, Clayton Mashad, and I have another great episode for you. In this episode, I talked to my buddy Mike Amaral from the Providence Improv Guild. We talk about lots of great stuff, including his experiences at Camp Improv Utopia, and we mainly talk about position play. So position play is this school of improv thought, comes from Miles Stroth of The Family. The idea behind position play are there are 4 basic types of scenes. There are straight/absurd scenes, realistic scenes, character scenes, and alternate reality scenes, and that each of those types of scenes has an inherent game built in, or a game format built into it. And so if you can figure out which of those 4 types of scenes you're in, then most of the work is already done for you. So it's a super great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it and learn a lot. And I also have another great episode coming out soon with Kate and Casey, the founders of Wage House Improv Theater in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And we talk about lots of great stuff, specifically all the things you need to know if you want to start your own theater. And I think I'm actually going to also do a mini-sode. We go on a little tangent for about half an hour where I gush about my love of 2-person improv. And I think I'm going to chop that part out and just make it a mini-sode because it's unrelated but super awesome. So look forward to both of those episodes. And as always, rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. And hopefully I'll see you guys soon. All right. So you want to just start off by doing intro background stuff? Talk about how you got started with improv and then...
Sure.
All the badass people you studied with.
I think they're all badass. I was introduced to improv late in life. I describe it as a midlife crisis I can afford, because not everyone can afford fast boats or cars or planes. But theater classes, I was working up in Boston. They were offered up at Improv Asylum. My cube mate had taken them. I didn't even know they existed. And I'm like, all right, let me try this place out. If I'm already commuting to Boston, I have to be there. Might as well finish my night there once a week before coming home. Did it, fell in love with it, and have pursued it, either performing or studying ever since. You want the badass list? Oh, gee. Outside of, can I name all my instructors in Improv Asylum? I think I can. Level 1, I had Chet Harding. Level 2, I believe I had Brian O'Hara. Level 3, level 4 was Marty. Level 3... Oh, I'm going to blow it. I don't know them all in the correct order. I have failed you as a student, Improv Asylum. My deepest apologies. But all in all, Tim Douglas, Michael Anastasia, who's out in L.A. right now, Kylie Fitzgerald, who's out in Chicago right now, Brian O'Hara, who's also out in L.A. I studied with a bunch of people that have moved on to the bigger theaters or better roles in the entertainment industry. Some of them have gone on to do films and commercials and whatnot. It was fun. Outside of that, I've had professional workshops with Jill Bernard, Jet Eveleth. I'm going to mess up her name. Sorry, Jet, I messed up your name. She was wonderful. We signed up for a workshop at Improv Asylum, and they had pushed that as many people could take it as possible. 2 of us signed up. She decided to hold it anyway, so we had Jet to ourselves for 3 hours. And it was probably the most bang for your buck I've ever gotten in any improv workshop.
Right.
Because we went over every exercise we wanted. We exchanged our theater ideas. She exchanged hers, and it was wonderful. Then I discovered Improv Utopia through an online search. Nick Armstrong set up a wonderful summer camp program. We call it summer camp, but they happen in the fall, and the spring, and the summer. And now there's 4 camps. There's an East Coast, a West Coast, a camp every year at Yosemite. And this year in May is the first year in Ireland, so that's going to be exciting.
Ooh.
Yeah, fancy. Through that, I've had Bob Dassey, I've had Craig Kukowski, I've had Carla Kukowski, Jamie Moyer, Brian O'Connell twice. Again, I'm going to do I'm going to do everyone a disrespect by not remembering my teachers, because I should have prepared, because an actor prepares, and I should have written down everyone I studied with before this. But of course, I did not. So failure, once again, is on me. But needless to say, I've gotten several workshops from people who have their theaters all across the country, and some internationally as well. And it's been great. I think that influx of ideas is very important, so you're not just pigeonholed in one school of thought.
Yeah. So before we start talking about what we plan to talk about, I like what you just said. So
let's peel that onion.
Let's unpack that.
That's a lot to unpack.
So the idea of, obviously, like in the broadest sense, it's good to get as many ideas from as many different schools and everything as possible. I want to ask what your opinion is on whether there's like a time, not really a time and a place, because the place is arbitrary, but whether you think the best way to do it is to get maybe a solid foundation in one school, and then once you get good at that, to then find another theory and see how that fits into that, and then continually doing it, versus, say you were in Chicago, for example, and being like, I want to get into improv. All right, Monday nights I'm going to be taking a class at I.O.
Tuesday
night's going to be at Annoyance, and then Friday night's going to be at Second City.
I think if you're the right type of person that can handle all types of differing, not so much fighting or competing, but slightly different tangential ideas at the same time and process them individually and see where you can weave them into your own tapestry, then it's great. I don't think that's typical of most people. Similar back when I was a young wee lad at university, I took both an ethics class and a logic and reasoning class at the same time from the same instructor. And he took me aside after, because the classes were back to back. He took me aside and he goes, "Weren't you in the logic and reasoning class?" I'm like, "Yeah." "But now you're taking ethics." "Yeah." Because most people don't take them the same semester at the same time, because they work on two different areas. One works on, this is logic, this is the best bang for your buck, this is the numbers, and ethics are personal feelings and whether or not mores and morals apply to your decisions versus logic. Because most people can't handle learning those two things at the same time. And all I did was ask my teacher, I said, "But you teach them both at the same time, don't you?" And he went, "Welcome aboard." And, I handled those classes. I did okay, passed them both. It was close though. So I think under that same school of thought, some people can handle it, and most should probably get a base, at least to a comfortable performing level with one school of thought in improv before, bringing in those other ideas. Because if you don't have a solid base with what you're doing, then taking in those other ideas might come across as, "Oh, I'm doing this thing wrong because these other people say to do it this way." And if you follow that trail, you will follow at least eight theories or schools of thought, and the previous 7 are all wrong, and then you'll just be cyclic. And you'll go back to the very first school you came at, and you realize that they may have been right, and then everybody was right, and everybody was wrong, and you'll just go crazy.
Yeah, right, that's the thing. Like, they give you, they might give you some note in one, and then you try to carry that over to to the other one, and they're like, "That's not what we want, that's not what we do."
The exact opposite note. Like, always do this, never do this. You can't both be right, you can't both be wrong.
Yeah, the Dave Wrzewski workshop, it was so good, and he refers to it as, like, subversive improv.
Guerrilla improv.
And I really think that it was so good, but I think almost like if you took that as your first class, it would like screw you for the rest of your improv career, because we purposely do scenes like he never wants you to do any backstory or anything. Like if you're you always do this, which normally like in a UCB style, like that's how you would let the person know what the game is. Like, well, you always think that things that happen in fairy tales happen to you in real life, and then it's like, okay, that's the game of the scene. We're doing a scene.
You're always late when we have to go somewhere, and that's the easiest. Yeah, it's in the manual and in their classes. Easiest way to describe or play a game.
And we did scenes where like he has no problem with questions, no problem with saying no, and like all of these things. And I feel like if you learned all of that stuff and then you went to another school, they would just be telling you like everything that you were doing was wrong. Like, well, you can't ask a question for an initiation.
You absolutely can't.
But I saw so many scenes where it was he asked the question, the person said no, and then they just repeated the question over and over again.
I think that's exactly where I found I wanted to know all the different schools of thought. Not to find out which one's right or which one's best, or which one's better, but I want to have all those tools in my toolbox. So if I'm playing in a theater where they play a certain style, or the scene calls for a certain style because the players in there have all been learned and all behave a certain way, I want to be able to follow along. I don't want to be the wrench in their works. I want to be the wrench that works in the toolbox. There's a hammer and a screwdriver, and that wrench is helping out rather than stopping the gears from turning. When I first started reading all the manuals, so you read, Truth and Comedy by Dell and Charna, and then you go out and you read one of McNapier's books, And you see them as I always saw them as two sides of the same coin. Some would say that Mick was teaching the exact opposite of Dell's, and some people still say that to this day, like, oh, Mick goes exact opposite. The way I interpreted it was, Dell's like, we don't ask questions because questions will lead to a disaster scene, will lead to lack of control, because you're saying I don't have anything. And Mick was like, if you're asking a question, you've already acknowledged you don't have something. And the scene is already bad, and the question asking is a human response out of nervousness. The question doesn't make the scene bad. The question is a symptom that the scene is already sick, and questions just come out as symptoms, almost like a post-nasal drip of improv. But I've learned, and the best thing was that questions are easily used in improv. They're easy initiations. You can use them all the time because a question is just a character's need to know something. So if all you have is a question, you're on stage, or you're in a class and you're level 1, level 2, and you have a character or a student that can't get past asking questions, have them spin it into a character's desire to know something. So rather than say, why didn't you run the dishwasher last night? The character needs to know that information. So the quick little light switch you pull is, I need to know why you never run the dishwasher at night. And now there's an emotion behind it. That's an offer. You know how my character feels about it. It's a question, but you know what I feel about this particular subject. But I'm asking you to emote back from there. So you already know I'm frustrated and or sad about it from my vocal tones. And the thing we're talking about is, how come you don't load the dishwasher? And if this is true, what else is true? What else don't you do in this household, aka in this relationship? And it just moves from there.
Yeah, I like that, because it kind of ties back to like the two ideas of don't respond to the question, respond to the tone. So it's not about what they're actually asking you. It's about what it means that they're asking you.
Yeah, the question is essentially an offer. I'm throwing you a gift right now. This is how my character feels, and this is a particular situation that I feel that way about. But what other situations are there? By all means, let's explore together and see why I'm feeling that way. Rather than just a reflex of, why do you do this? That doesn't help. But how I feel about why you do a certain thing. That's where we're going.
Yeah, and then also this idea of like there's no such thing as a metaphor or something. Like someone is asking you, the idea of like, I need to know why you didn't unload the dishwasher. And rather than just taking that as like the everyday mundane thing, like turn into like a person that like the most important thing in their life is that they need to know why you didn't unload the dishwasher. That's
definitely taking it to a 10, but just the words I need to know, it just adds the gravitas. The weight is there. It's not just, hey, how come you didn't load the dishwasher? Oh, I forgot about it. Oh, okay, that's 2 lines of dialogue that are useless in the scene. The audience is bored. Yeah, they have dishwashers at home that somebody doesn't load, but we haven't made that the crux of our scene. We haven't found the emotion. If I stress, I need to know. It's like, I want to understand. If you're never going to load that dishwasher, great. Fine. But I need to know why. Because I need to understand you. So that character dynamic, that relationship, there's a piece of knowledge missing there between those two characters that one is actively asking for. Help me know you better. And then we'll find some more wackiness as we get there, but help me know you. And then as you explore and expose yourself to me, not in that way, the weirdness happens.
Yeah. It's another thing I've kind of been thinking about, of how obviously the rules are what they are. Like they're
rules. Rules are meant to be broken. Almost everyone I've studied with has said that once you know the rules, then you know how to bend or break them.
Right. It's more like the way that, like the example you just gave of why didn't you unload the dishwasher versus I need to know why you didn't unload the dishwasher. Like that second one doesn't have a question mark at the end.
Right. It's a question in an offer statement form.
But it's
essentially the same reaction. If your brain wants to ask that question, you just take that quick second and swap it into a need or a desire. Because we always talk about what are our characters' wants, needs, how are they going to move forward. And my want and need is, let's figure out why this question that my body wanted to ask, because I'm panicked, becomes a driving force in our scene.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking that with like yes and lately too, that you learn, at least like, in your level 1, I don't know if you've ever done it, but that exercise where like you do no, yes, but, yes, and, whether it's like you're planning a party, it's, we should do this, and then the first time everyone says no, then they say yes, but we should also do this other thing, and then the yes, and.
Which one makes you feel best? It's the yes, and moving forward, and that's, like, my first exercise in level 1, I think we actually just stood and did 2 lines, and someone said, just walk up to the other person, you don't initiate. The initiation is the other line just looking at you and saying no to your face, and then swap, go to the other side of the line. So all we did for 5 minutes was have someone just look at us and say no. At the end of it, we were asked, how do you feel about that? It's kind of negative. You don't want to be told no all day, even as an adult. Like, children definitely don't want to hear it, and that's why they repeat it all the time. But adults don't want to hear it. And the moment we changed it into a yes, even without any context, everyone was smiling, everyone was happier. You would hear the yeses as people smile. I did phone support for years. You'd be told, always smile when you're talking to a customer, no matter how you feel. Your body will shape a happier sound out of it, and you will actually feel more. You'll be more attentive to them, more receptive, and they'll think that you're happier, and they'll be happier back to you unless they're really upset when they call.
Yeah, so we were doing this exercise. So we in one of our practices the other day. So we were doing where you start off and you literally say yes and repeat whatever the person said, and then we dropped it to where you're just agreeing, and it started slipping to these yes buts. And at first I was like, I feel like we're not fully doing what we're trying to do. And then I would think about some of them and think that they really are, they're still yes ands, it's just that the normal way that you present things, I don't know, there's almost 2 types of yes buts. So the example, the initiation, or an example of the first 2 lines was, this house is haunted. Yes, but it was on sale. And at first it was that's not really agreement. Then I was
it's not full agreement, but it's agreeing the idea this house is haunted, and the but is it was on sale. So which idea is more important to play? We're in a haunted house. That's my character's offer. Or this is on sale. I'm obviously a spinster or I'm frugal. That's my character's offer. So now we've got 2 separate hot offers on the plate. Which one are we actually going to explore? If it's a character-driven team, we could explore them both. But,
I guess that is right. That's the whole argument against the yes but, is that you end up with these 2 opposing ideas. But in that case, it was, I don't know, I was just thinking it kind of is like an and. It's just that in order to present it in a way that sounds natural, you'd be yes, and can you believe it was on sale? I guess you could say that, and that would be the same.
You're still offering information about your character that the sale was exciting for your character. So character A is concerned that it's haunted. Character B agrees it's haunted, but is happy about the sale. And then we know what drives these 2 people. Great. Now these 2 characters, we have their base. We know what drives them individually. How do these 2 emotions and or wants start intersecting as we explore this haunted house?
Right. Yeah, and I feel and that was the thing. Is at first I was I was kind of mad about the butting just because focus on the exercise that we were doing.
It's all word choice and semantics. So yes, but is more, hey, I'm going to put a hand out or put a wall up and say, I hear your idea, but my idea is important. Yes, and can you believe it was on sale? That's excitement. I am happy that you agree it's haunted. So to me, it's not that the haunting doesn't matter. That's a selling point. Yes, it's haunted and it was on sale. So now I'm excited that it's haunted and excited that it's on sale. Meanwhile, you are concerned it's haunted.
Yeah, I know. I guess why because I was thinking about it, having that conversation in my head. But then I almost get to the point where to thinking that the but was actually better, because then you have this game of a person who is always willing to take, who is so fooled by a deal or so fooled by a promotion that you will take on something that is totally ridiculous, like this car only has 3 tires. Yeah, but they threw in the free warranty. Or I don't know.
It's still a juxtaposition. I can see how some people would have concerns about trying to play it, and some people, it could be veteran improvisers in the audience going well, that was a yes, but now you're going to lose me. I'm not necessarily there for the other improvisers in the audience. They're going to find 100 things I do wrong on stage every single performance. So I'm not trying to impress them or make a point. If I get them laughing, then yeah, I've done really good. If I've gotten to someone who knows the craft and who studies it rather than watches a piece of entertainment, and I still make them laugh, that's bonus points for me. But my goal is not to get them. My goal is to get audience members entertained. audience members engaged, edge of their seat type thing, like what's happening next. They want to know what's happening next. I want them to keep asking themselves that question. What happens next? What happens next? If they get bored with the character, then we've already lost them. I want them to keep them entertained, engaged, and if that becomes they come to more shows, they stop us after the show and ask us what we do and how we learned it. If they come and take classes, all the more better. The more people in this art form, the better, I think.
Yeah. I definitely think it's a mistake to try to play with the improvisers in the room. And unfortunately, that just is something that, especially in like a small community, just accidentally happens that you end up, that just happens to be your audience so much.
Yes.
But if you...
Sometimes you're a victim of the room itself. And the room is, it's 5 people who wandered in off the street, great, and the 8 people that are in the second act tonight. Well, that's the audience we're playing to. Let's see what we can do with that.
Right. I can make do meta jokes.
A lot of inside baseball happens. It's forgivable once in a while, but again, the 5 people off the street, they're the ones that are going to go make the, TripAdvisor or Yelp reviews and trademark those respective companies. This podcast is neither endorsed or paid for by Yelp or TripAdvisor.
Not yet, but if you guys are looking for to sponsor some people, I'll take the money.
Crystal Pepsi. We're looking at you anytime. So those audience members, they're the ones that are going to tell their friends or their relatives that, I may have saw a $5 or $10 show in some place, but it was good, and here's why. Rather than wait for a giant theater event that comes around every 2 or 3 months and pay $75 for a seat to see whatever the sequel to Phantom of the Opera is. Spoiler alert, I know what it is. I saw it last week, and you know what? It probably shouldn't have made it. That's not important.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing with, I guess, just as a performer, like, whether it's like, that person broke the rules, I'm gonna tune out, or I feel like such the better response is like, that person just dug, not even dug themselves a hole, because the breaking the rules isn't always bad, but ooh, that person didn't do what I would have done. I want to see how they're going to make that scene work.
A rule gets, if we're talking about rules being, the guidelines, okay, they get stepped on once in a while. If you're someone who plays hardline rules and a rule gets broken, that's my cue to double down. Like, all right, let's see where else this can go. That'd still be entertaining and fun to play. Again, rules will maybe be broken. Dell and John will tell you, here's all the rules. Nick will tell you there are no rules, and it's just a reaction to what happens already. It's gone bad. I've been in a dozen or more fully organic scenes and organic sets that I love. I took JTS Brown from Craig Kukowski in Improv Utopia, and that class, that workshop, that form, it's got a skeleton structure around it. It's basically, there's an opening, and there's a button at the end, but everything that happens in the middle is anything you guys want it to be. And there is a known bag of tricks that they call gimmicks to pull from that you can use to stabilize or right the ship or recalibrate the compass every few scenes, get this thing back on order and get everyone on the same page. And then insanity happens and get everyone back on the same page and insanity happens. I found it a real treat to watch. I found it a doubly treat to perform. And I wish we did more of it here at Pig. I'm hoping that we do, but we'll see. We'll get there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it, both from Craig and from Nick Armstrong, who studied it for a long time.
I think Nick might be still on the team, one of the only ones that's doing a JTS in the LA area.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, but I've never gotten to see one.
It's wonderful. I have a couple of videos I can send you after this.
Sweet.
I do.
Yeah, it's like very stream of consciousness. Is that right?
There's some of that. It's no wrong.
Dream.
It's like
giant dream sequence. I can't remember the exact way I've heard it.
You could say it's like a dream sequence, or a vision quest, as it were, or someone had the wrong type of mushrooms, and this is what comes out of it. A lot of it makes sense. Like if you follow along and you use all those gimmicks the way they're meant to be used, then it's essentially like palate cleansers. Every time a gimmick comes up, it's entertaining to the audience. It's a known structure or a known format that everyone knows how to play this gimmick. So even though people are on stage, there's 8 different things going on at once, a gimmick is declared, and then suddenly all the players are involved in the success of that gimmick, and then it melts away to chaos again, and then another gimmick shows up, and it's spontaneous when it's called for, but everyone knows the rules of the gimmick and they play it, and it's like impressions. It's like watching a morphing picture in a 3D museum somewhere, And like every once in a while it morphs, oh, that's a human face. And then it looks like a lump of silly putty again. And suddenly that's very distinctly a cat. And then it's back to a lump of silly putty. And that's essentially how the form plays. It plays loose and crazy and everyone's having fun. And then once in a while there's a structure that the audience, it's a breather. It's the group game in a Herald.
Right.
The audience goes, this is something I can follow along with. This is great. This appears to have a set of rules that mirror, normal human behavior. And then just when they're calm again, just when they've taken that breath, we're off and running again, and we take them on a different adventure. So it's a very fun game to play.
Cool. So earlier you said you studied with Brian James O'Connell twice.
BOC, I did twice. I was lucky. Been lucky.
Yeah, so that's...
very lucky.
So, audience members, for those of you who don't know...
For those of you who don't know, Brian James...
Brian O'Connell is... would you say the protege of Miles Straw?
I think Miles would say that. I know Brian says it. They have this Jedi Padawan thing. They have this wonderful mentor-mentee relationship that I both got to listen to their podcast and I hear it. And it's wonderful. It's a passing of ideas and the evolution of those ideas. So you keep the core together and trying to find new ways to explain and instruct new students and what those ideas mean and how they work. It's great.
Yeah, so Miles just started Pack Theater out in L.A. So then before that, he was just doing the Miles Straw workshops.
Yeah, the MSW.
And so, again, for audience members who don't know...
Inside baseball.
Miles Straw studied with Doug Close. He's one of the original members of the family. So that's Ian Roberts, Matt Walsh, Matt Besser, Ollie Paranakian, Adam McKay.
What about Neil?
Neil Flynn.
There he is.
And then Miles Straw. So I think that's the family as we know it. And they created Deconstruction, the movie, and essentially perfected the Herald. So they started the Three Mad Rituals as we... So that's backstory for those of you who don't.
When I got the backstory on Deconstruction from BOC, the comment was everyone in the family sat around and said, hey, can we do something besides the Herald? And Dell's response back was, well, no one's ever asked me that before. What do you want to do? And that's when they invented and created the Decon form, which I think is wonderful. It's all the story of, hey, do we have to keep doing this? No, it's improv. What else do you want to do? This is just what we settled on. If you're having fun with it, we're going to keep doing it. If you want to do something new, let's talk.
Yeah, so now I've heard, I think specifically from Brian, but he says refers to if Herald is like the algebra of improv, then the Deconstruction is the calculus of improv, which is obviously just a way of being like, my form is so vastly superior to your form. But
we've talked about this. We've talked about it in Improv Utopia. Like the Herald is great, and some people are doing. Karen Gracci is doing vertical heralds and a few other things. Like I know here at Pig they've done musical heralds, great. We want to combine different. I don't want to call those gimmicks. They combine different flavors, so to speak, and let's throw a lens on it and change the herald up a little bit. The vertical herald was interesting when I saw it at Improv Utopia. So that's fun. It's the same structure, but it's basically it's on its side. It's tilted a little bit, and things don't progress the way you expect them to. It's still a great show. It's a marvelous show. But if you're looking for a standard herald, you get surprised because they're not following the standard form of A1, B1. They're not doing the heightening in the way you think they would. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't think I've ever... I'm sure I've heard about it. But...
Yeah, she's doing some great work, and I thought it was very fun to see. It's fun to watch. I've watched that 2 years in a row, so that was good.
Cool, yeah. So before we talk specifically about the Deconstruction, so Pack Theater, Miles, and Brian, their whole big way that they teach improv is position play.
There's the magic, isn't it?
There's the magic.
There's the magic.
So when you were saying that, maybe Truth in Comedy and Mick Napier are opposite sides of the coin, I tend to think of it as Mick and Miles are opposite sides of the coin in the sense that, everything Mick teaches about is, how to go first, how to take care of yourself. It's, he has this whole, the whole book, and then there's, one paragraph in it that's well, what if you don't go first? And then he's Well, then just keep doing whatever you were going to do.
Essentially,
act like you were.
Hopefully, your scene partner has read this book.
yeah. Do exactly what you were going to do anyway, and then hopefully, if they're an astronaut and they're, we're gonna have to walk over to that crater over there, and you came out and you were gonna be a cowboy, then you're like, woohoo, let's go get that fucking
You talk about space cowboys. Then the movie Armageddon shows up. You got space cowboys. It happens.
Whereas Miles and the whole idea of position play is waiting till you realize what the other person wants you to do, and then doing that.
Or specifically waiting till the other person declares what essentially position they're playing, like what type of scene that you think they're going to play in that character, and then how to respond to that.
Right.
Yeah, I got BOC covered position play 2 years ago at Improv Utopia. Hey Nick, we're hawking Improv Utopia here. Improv Utopia, it was East Coast, and it was character development and a little bit of position play. I'm thoroughly mangling the name of the workshop. I don't remember what it was, but I have a ton of notes on it. And that was my first direct encounter with position play, and how he mentioned that all scenes can be broken down to 4 basic types. And I was like, well, this is cool, because you think about, you get this type of scene, you get that type of scene. It's like, nope, 4 types. Yeah, but you have that, nope, 4 types. And by gum, they're right. You show me any scene, either in a movie or on TV or in a live theater performance, and yes, it can fit into one of those 4 categories every single time.
Yeah. So let's talk about those 4 scenes. So there's 4 scenes. So
4 scene types. 4
scene types.
4 known scene types.
So the most common one, or the one that we see the most, is straight absurd.
Correct. I would say it's the majority of the scenes I've seen. Scenes I've seen, boy, it's going to be a lot of weird words. That would be the majority of all the scenes I have witnessed as an audience member or a player, or have been in myself. It's straight absurd. One person acts the straight man, or the base of normalcy, or one person essentially is the audience, and the other person has some sort of wacky behavior or trait. And that becomes the game, the playing of that wackiness off the straight person.
Yeah, so I feel like the reason that becomes the most commonly seen scene, most
right?
commonly witnessed scene,
right?
is because that's really how, especially like UCB or any place that really focuses on the game. I guess IO too, even though they're not as game centric, but like it's the whole idea. Like you wait for an unusual thing to happen, you call out that unusual thing, and you explore that unusual thing. And usually it's obviously that, like, the two of you are trying to act like straight people. One of the people says something unusual.
Or does something unusual.
That is, whether it's a mistake or whether it's from a premise or whatever. And then you call that thing out, and then they're pointing out other ways in which they do that absurd
Yeah, the success in the UCB method is that unusual thing should become game. If it doesn't, and we're just playing with multiple unusual things on stage, then we've lost focus of the scene, and we might not know where it's going to go. We might not be able to get to heightening. We're not going to have a repeatable idea. We're not going to find something that we can play if we don't settle on this is the thing we're going to play.
All right, hold on 2 seconds. I'm going to edit this out, but I'm going to pull open my notes so that I have more prompts that I could throw at you.
Still looking for sponsorship from Crystal Pepsi.
We're going to be waiting a long time. Alright, so let's talk about just some advice, rules of thumb for the straight absurd scene. So that's straight/absurd.
Correct.
So like we said, that's the most common. If you've ever done improv, you've played a lot of straight absurd scenes. But I feel like his advice, him and Miles' advice, is Brian and Miles' advice for that is interesting because you're still doing that same type of scene that they have, but it's different advice that you don't necessarily hear when you're just like...
Right, the absurd behavior is going to be, especially in decon, it's going to be as a lens, basically. That everyone in the audience can identify someone in their life that has this other type of behavior. So if it's someone that's always mean, or someone that's crazy stingy, or someone that's gluttonous even though they don't have to be, some other sin or some other wackiness that they focus on, they know someone like that. And then as we dial down and we adjust the focus on that lens, that absurd person is made clearer and clearer as to what that absurdity is. And they heighten it and they heighten it to the point where The audience identifies, yes, that's someone, I know someone exactly like that. I'm glad someone is calling them out on it, and I'm glad it's being pointed out how weird it is, and I get to laugh at it. And this amuses me. And the next time they see that person who has that absurd behavior, instead of thinking, I don't like this person, or instead of thinking, they're a nuisance to me, they might get a happy memory that someone made this a funny thing. And yeah, this is who you are in life. This is who you are in life. And as long as you're not treating people horribly, and then we laugh about not someone who's like going out and beating other people up, or kicking people out of their homes as a horrible landlord. Not to the extreme, although those people exist. So rather than I can laugh at those people, maybe, okay, I've seen other people play people like you. I have a little bit more insight in how your mind might work, and maybe I have a better way or a possible chance of communicating with you. Maybe I'll be able to say a few sentences that will actually get through your level of absurdity, and I'll understand that when you say your absurd thing, that's through your own filter, that it might mean something different than the way I always perceive it. So it gives you a little inroads on this is how this person behaves, this is how people like this behave, and how to walk around that behavior and work with it.
Oh, that's super cool from like an applied improv sense. Because even like Brian will always say stuff like using improv to change the world.
I have not yet memorized his lovely paragraph on that. I have it written down in several places for multiple camps, and it's a wonderful sentiment. And I wish I could tell you exactly what it says right now.
If you want to hear it, you can listen to episode 1 of the Pack Theater Weilstrath workshop.
Oh yeah, he does throw it out there, doesn't he?
Yeah,
so nonchalant. He's got it.
He has like so many. Like he has like 10 not rule, but 10 things he does in improv. Where like, who are we? How do I feel about you? How do I really feel about you? What are we doing? Why is the audience watching this? Why is
why are they still watching? Why are they still watching?
Yeah, that's like the one that it's like 6 of the 10 things are why is the audience watching this?
Like every 3 seconds they ask them, every 5 seconds they ask themselves that, why am I watching this? Why am I watching this? He's not wrong. You got to be able to keep answering that question so that they stay engaged to the next point. If you're going to make a statement, or you want some ha-has, and you just want to have a ha-ha comedy show that people may or may not come back to, may or may not be thinking about the next day, then yeah, you can do that. That's fine. I'm not disparaging anyone who does that. I was in a short form only group for a year and a half, and that was basically our goal. We didn't necessarily look for a deeper meaning. We weren't telling a story with a moral. We weren't trying to change people's minds on stage. We were just having a good time that night, and then we were gone. But if you want people to go, think about what we saw on stage, and hey, I do see people like that in my life, and I do want to be able to talk to them better, or maybe they don't know how they're perceived because they don't have that filter that the rest of us have. Then that's the kind of thing where you are getting a little bit further. So if the audience is engaged, then they're going to remember it better the next day. They might not remember all the jokes, but they'll remember, hey, that scene happened where someone resembled someone that I either work with or that I live with, or someone in my family, and it made me have a feeling about the character on stage. That character doesn't exist. That person made him up 5 seconds ago. But you know what? I have feelings about that character. And that's what the audience is going to
Yeah, I guess you could argue that that's what takes it to be art. I guess you could use that as a very loose definition of art.
Why do we love heroes? Why do we love villains? They're the most cinematic, most dramatic characters in anything we do. Or why do we love characters that have heart? Because once in a while they'll just be a second or third string character in a motion picture or a TV show, and they pull on your heartstrings the right way, and you go like, I'm always going to remember that character, even if they only showed up once, because it made me feel something when I watched it, and it wasn't just a throwaway line.
Yeah. All right. So still got our other 3.
So Brian O'Connell has this lovely long paragraph. You should listen to it, and it's about how improv is going to save the world. It's going to work. I believe it'll heal the world. Heal the world. That is correct.
Heal the world.
We're going to get there.
So then the next type is characters or peas in a pod, mirroring type of scenes.
Character-driven scenes don't have to be peas in a pod. In the decon, it's specifically taught to us to be peas in the pod. But characters, like I said, astronaut and cowboy, it can happen. That cowboy just happens to also be on the moon. So he's an astronaut, but you know what? Maybe he's a rancher at home. So he's going to have cowboy tendencies, but he's also an astronaut along with the other guy who's just Air Force cadet. I'm an astronaut. I'm 100% astronaut and have been since I wanted to be a kid. This other kid wanted to be a cowboy, just went into the astronaut business.
Yeah, that's interesting because I always think of it in my head as them being. Well, so the way that I think about the position play just kind of jumping ahead because we haven't talked about the third and fourth one.
We'll get there.
When I think about, like, straight absurd is obviously straight absurd. One character is straight, one is absurd. And I always think of character scenes as being absurd, if that makes sense. And then you have your realistic scenes, and those are, like, straight, and then you have your alternate reality, and those are... could be a blend of anything, but the absurd thing is the situation or the environment. So they're all the way I do, they're all combinations of a straight absurd.
I see how you're calling characters absurd, but to them they're not absurd. And to the other character they're not either.
Right, they both think that they're both straight people, but
yeah. So it's not absurd. It's not being called out. I'm not going to call out the cowboy's behavior. Exactly. The cowboy's not going to call out the astronaut's behavior. You are an astronaut. I know you're an astronaut. You're going to behave and react to things as an astronaut would. I'm a cowboy. I'm going to behave and react to things as a cowboy would. But we're not calling each other out on that. We're not saying, hey, why are you acting like a cowboy? It's declared, I am a cowboy. I am an astronaut. So I don't think it's a true absurdity. Although, if you think about it that way, that's fine. That's in your school of thought. That's how you put it all into your crystal ball of improv in your head. And that's how you work with it. Great. I see characters as just that. Strong character choices, and that's the filter. That's the POV. That's the lens. The cowboy always sees something and reacts as if a cowboy would. It continually heightens it. You're on the moon, and you're a space cowboy, and the other one's just an astronaut, and you see something moving through the crater. The astronaut's always going to see something and go, oh, I've detected an unknown life form. And the cowboy could go, hey guys, we got space cows. Space cows, we're going to go see that big space cow. He's going to declare it something, even though that's not what it is yet. It hasn't been dissected in the lab. They're animals, you shouldn't dissect them. But they haven't investigated what that thing moving in the crater is. But the cowboy's going to name it something like a cowboy would, and the astronaut's going to be technical and name it like an astronaut would.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, neither's absurd. They just got their own game to play, and then they're finding a game to play together.
Yeah.
That's a fun little Paul Valancourt thing thrown in for you.
Yeah, I always think of them as characters. I think I mentioned this on one of the reference on one of the earlier podcasts. But have you ever seen that Key and Peele sketch? It's like they're the two bellhops, and they're like super into Game of Thrones.
Yep.
And they're like, you see Khaleesi come down with a dragon. I'm like, Khal Drogo, man.
I'm glad we're talking about Miles and BOC, because BOC can do that entire sketch by himself, and he does in workshops, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's always what I guess that's kind of how I came up with the idea of thinking of like character wasn't being two absurd people, where they're just like,
but they're not absurd.
They're just heightening.
Especially those guys. They're peas in a pod character driven.
Right.
They are the same character, just with two different slightly points of view, two different lives. They have two different families, but they see the world through the same lens. So they're talking that Game of Thrones bit, and yes, they both heighten each other's impressions. They happen to be bellhops or doormen or whatever they are, but they love that Game of Thrones stuff. So that's the piece in the pod, but I don't consider it absurd because they don't find each other weird. They don't try to correct each other's behavior. They don't try to find something that will stop that from happening. That's their life, and they're both happy with that segment of their life.
Yeah, I agree. And then, because the other thing, Brian, I also kind of formed this. So one of the other thing Brian says is like to have the mantra when you're doing the character scenes. But I know that, again, like, there's this tenuousness between like position play and the deconstruction, because you can learn it from either way. Like there's just position play as a standalone thing, and then there's at least a prescribed deconstruction of how you.
Which position play scene types go in the certain format of the decon? Yeah.
Right, and those ones do tend to be those character scenes, which are like scene 2 and 3.
The character scenes, and they are peas in the pod, specifically to heighten and focus on a trait or traits that you saw in the, let's get to realism next, into the opening scene or the core scene of the decon, which is the realistic scene. So you find something in the characters of the realistic scene, and that's what you focus the lens on, and that's what you dial in on. And say, hey audience, this is the part of this character I want you to pay attention to in future scenes. No, really, I really want you to pay attention to it. I'm going to let you know how I paid attention to it, and now so will you.
Right. Yeah, so that's how you... Yeah, let's just step back and talk about the realistic scenes.
Hey!
I think those are probably the least common ones that you see, because people aren't trying to be funny, or they're like, there's a game that is inherent in it, but it's not as obvious. It's a much more like subtle or like nuanced game. You would agree with that?
If you know other people in your group, you're not working with someone for the brand. Although when I was learning the decon, there were people on stage that were chosen for the first realistic scene exercise we did. And other than meeting themselves, meeting the other person earlier that day at camp, these two people had never worked with each other before, had never seen video of the other people, had never seen them work in a different group, and they were chosen for the realistic scene. And they were just told, let's have a conversation, the two of you, we're just going to be watching it, about, conversation X. We're going to talk about this TV show, which I believe they did. And one person had seen the entire run of the show, and the other person had only been halfway through, and that became part of this conversation. And just talking about a regular thing they both had as a common frame of reference, they found funny in it. It happened, it came up, and they were able to heighten the funny they found by just having a realistic conversation about it. One person would say, I stopped watching it, after season 2, and the other person would be like freaking out, oh my god, season 3 is when it became really good. You have to go back to it. At that point, they're not being straight absurd. They are being a realistic person. They are themselves. They love that show, and they want to share that love of that show with the other person who abandoned it early.
Right.
And it was just so fun to watch.
Yeah. Right. I think the reason you don't see those as much is because people are afraid, maybe, to do that. They want to get...
People want
find the funny.
You want to be funny, follow the fun. But with Decon, again, let's show you real life, which is what the realistic scene's all about. And then let's focus in on what is it about these characters that was a little either off base or just a characteristic we want to focus on. And then we keep showing that slice of life again as it evolves through time.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think Brian might use this example, but like a realistic scene is kind of like, I think he uses Friends as the analogy, where it's like, they're all realistic people, and they each have like little things about them, like whatever, Rachel's like the pretty one, and Joey's the stupid one, and Ross is the uptight one, and
Monica's the competitive one.
Yeah, and Zoe's her name?
Chandler's the funny name.
Like, and Zoe's
Phoebe?
Phoebe's
Zoe?
I was thinking Zoe.
Zoe?
Whatever.
And Phoebe Buffet
is the
twin sister Ursula from Mad About You. Oh, I know my TV references.
She's the kooky, crazy one or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're all just realistic, regular people. They're obviously slightly archetyped and slightly exaggerated versions of those people. They're just people being themselves, and there's implicit games that are already in that. Like, oh, well then what happens when the kooky person and the stupid person go to the DMV together? Maybe one has, conspiracies about the government tracking you, and the other person is
so clueless they think it's a fun experience.
Right. So there's nothing absurd about those characters. Those characters just have personalities and have traits, and there's always ways. It's not like an absurd character where the game is the absurd thing. The game is like how just the two...
How do those dynamics balance?
Which I think is a super interesting way.
Yeah, no one goes out of their way to call Joey out for being uneducated or just... I just want to call him uneducated. I want to call... Now we're talking about Friends. I want to call Joey just... if this were a role-playing game, he might have a low intelligence but a high wisdom. He knows what people should do. He just doesn't always do it, or vice versa. It's like he just doesn't get what on the same level that other people get. But you could say that of any of those characters in that show. They all have their own thing, and they just don't understand what we would consider a basic understanding of a fact the same way everybody else does.
Right, yeah, and everyone knows a person. Every human being is like that.
Everyone has a Ross in their life, and yes, that person is the worst person in your life.
Unless that's you. If you don't have a Ross in your life, that's you.
If you're the Ross in your life, look in the mirror. What are you doing? Again, the realistic scene, people say, I think we teach basic reality here. I'll be teaching, helping teach a level 1 class in about a half hour myself. And I know we have to get the who, the what, and the where's out. And then the glory of position play is that falls by the wayside a little bit. It's like now that you've learned these skills and they become ingrained in your head, you know how to find the who, the what, and the where, just based on what the first character's initiation, either physically or verbally, is. You wait for that. And I think we get to that last position play. I know you're dying to talk about. which is alternate reality.
Yes, the alternate reality.
Which, as Brian lovingly told us, and he was absolutely correct, it can masquerade as the other three. So you're never quite sure you're in alternate reality right away. But it's the other way around. In the first, I think it was the first 3 lines of dialogue, was the first exercise. He'll have to correct me on that. That you can tell what type of scene it is. You should know by the third line of dialogue. You might know by the second line of dialogue. So if there's 2 characters talking, and you just have, "Hey Joe, you're late for work again today. I have to tell the boss, yeah, my car broke down. I'm sorry." Right now, nothing weird has been declared. There's nothing absurd. No one's got a weird attitude about that. Not like, high five, you're late for work again. It's a typical reaction to it. Probably a realistic scene. These seem 2 realistic guys. They're in the regular world. Everything's fine. Then you get a character like, "Oh, hey Irma, I noticed that you only brought cake again for lunch." And then Irma gets, "Yeah, I love cake. I love cake. Cake's my favorite. All I ever want to do is eat cake all day. What's wrong with that? Why is there a problem with my cake?" Now we know when it's straight absurd. And you can dictate that because someone said something that seems as a baseline normal for the reality we live in, and this other person is cake person. And that's not something you see every single day in your life. And then you want to get to character-driven, and then both characters like, "Oh, I'm a cab driver. And I look at the world through a cab driver's lens." And then someone else is a socialite, and they're always going to react from a socialite's point of view. And we're not calling it out as straight absurd, it's not unusual behavior, but this cab driver is just going to do cab driver things. Every time something happens in the scene, they look at it. Someone says, "Oh, they're waiting in line somewhere," and the cab driver would say, "Come on, the meter's running. This cost me. This would be $15 if I was in the cab." The socialite going to be like, "Oh, I know. I make $50,000 a day just by standing somewhere. I'm making money right now." And it's not weird. That's what they do. They make money just by being someplace, and the cab driver's losing money just by being stuck someplace.
Oh, yeah.
And then alternate reality, the rule of that was, if you don't know within the first 3 lines of dialogue what type of scene it is, then it's alternate reality. Because if you can't say it's definitely realistic, or it's definitely character-driven, or it's definitely straight absurd, then the rule is it's alternate reality. And alternate reality is either it mirrors our own world, or it's similar to a logical world in some way, but there's a difference. Like, let's take Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's an alternate reality. Vampires and demons exist. Other than that, it's the United States. They're in Sunnyvale, California. They start off in high school. They have typical high school stuff they have to go through. But all this mystical stuff happens to be real and true, and they have to deal with that. And after the very first half of the first episode, where suddenly you think that's weirdness, that becomes the baseline for their entire rest of the existence. The entire run of the show is, these things exist, our job is to kill them. You're welcome.
Yeah. Not to go back to another Key and Peele sketch, but I love the one where it's the post-apocalyptic one. It's like them and zombies.
Yeah.
They're zombies, but the zombies are racist.
Yeah.
So they don't. I was thinking of that as like a great alternate. It's just them and their normal thing, but then they're
because the alternate reality thing is this happens to be post-apocalyptic. We're still dealing with everyday problems. We're still dealing with racism. We're still dealing with if they explored that even further, you'd have classism. You'd have everything show up that shows up in the world we live in. It just happens to be populated by zombies. Right.
Yeah. I think that's always the example that I think of.
Simplest alternate reality in the world. I won't call it the simplest. The closest. What if you're in a place and you're talking about how purple the sky looks tonight? Yeah, it's purple. It was red all day today, but now it's purple as the sun goes down. That's not the colors we have. That just happens to be whatever colors the gases in that planet makes refract through their atmosphere. That's the simple. It could just be any other type of scene in the world, but because there's a stated difference that we know differs from our base reality, it qualifies as an alternate reality scene. So again, that's the catch-all. Like, I don't know what type of scene it is. Yeah, it's one of these 4. And if you can't decide which of the other 3 it seems to be, it's probably an alternate reality scene.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I always kind of thought the way I think of it is the difference between the other 3, this is kind of what I was saying earlier, has to do with like the character relationships, and they're in a non-alternate reality. They're in the same base reality that us as humans exist. And then the alternate reality, because it's separate from the way that the 2 characters relate to each other, but is how the characters relate to the environment or to the reality.
Yeah, it's does the difference in their reality make a difference in behavior, or cause them to perceive their world differently than we would perceive ours? If you have going back and do like a Renaissance, 2 nights during the Renaissance. I don't know, were the Knights of the Renaissance? My history is failing me. It's like 2 nights that meet up. Now, if the actors played their characters using the same behaviors that a knight would have, and not the Monty Python effect of 2 nights meeting up, and not, bashing coconuts and not being ridiculous. If they played them as straight knights, would you consider it a character-driven scene? Like, I don't see a characterization. Unless they're being like the knightiest knight in the world and really pushing and heightening their knightitude or their knighthood, as it were. Then it's a realistic scene. But since it takes place somewhere else, you would call that an alternate reality scene.
Yeah, I guess this is my question of whether you think of alternate reality as a 4th scene type, or as possibly a modifier for the other 3, but that could still be a standalone. Like, you could just do a scene where, say there's a cockroach or a rat in your apartment. It's just us sitting around, like, oh, can you hand me the Captain Crunch, and we're just eating cereal. And then it's like a rat scurries by, and you're like, we're gonna need a bigger cage. Then it's like, okay, now we're doing an alternate reality where we're doing Jaws.
Well, that's the thing. Is everyone refer to? We always handle vermin as people would do in the movie Jaws. There's always Jaws references for everything. Then yes, that looks like a character-driven scene, but if the whole world is like that, if everyone that comes in the door to help us is doing either a Quint or one of the professors, I never remembers Quint, or the sheriff, everyone's doing something that's a Jaws reference, then yeah, the alternate reality in this world is the Jaws tropes are played out. And that's where the funny is, that things are looked through the Jaws lens. So alternate reality, the fun comes from, we know what type of trope it is. Like I said, we just happen to, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, vampires. That's the alternate reality they live in. Everything looks the same except for vampires. And they play the vampire tropes a little differently than you'd see in some of the older films. They banter with the villains. The anti-hero, Spike, shows up, and it's like, now there's a love-hate relationship. Now there's romance going on with the vampire. Oh, now it's spun on its head a little bit. It's not old-school Christopher Lee Dracula films where the guy who's investigating, who turns out to be Von Helsing, has to stake them all before he gets killed, or before Dracula kills, whoever the victims of that film are. It's not that straight, cut-and-dry detective work film. It's a world where vampires exist, and they end up just cramping your style. Buffy just wants to be a kid, but she can't because vampires exist, and for some unforeseen reason, it's her job to kill them, and it is a pain in the neck. She has finals to study for. She had to go to college. And that's where the fun is. It's not just we're fighting vampires. It's we're fighting vampires, and I'm still a kid, and I'm still trying to have a regular life. And that's where the shoehorning of the funny comes in.
Right, yeah, so as opposed to contrasting characters against characters, it's characters against a reality.
It's, what is this trope that the reality is that we're looking at? Again, you wouldn't necessarily do an alternate reality scene where just the sky is a different color. That's semantics.
Right,
that's
how much does that change?
It's like, at that point, it's other things are different colors. That reality is other things are different colors than we know of. And I can't think of something in my head that you could make a storyline off of, but that would be it. You'd find it.
Yeah, I guess any genre scene also is an alternate reality, because
is it, or is it a realistic scene? If it's a war film, Saving Private Ryan, you take any scene out of that film, yeah, these guys, they're both soldiers, and you'd think it's character driven, but unless I am being more soldier than any other soldier before, and I'm trying to be the best soldier possible, this is where we live right now. It's a realistic scene in that time and space.
That's true. Yeah, I guess I was thinking more like sci-fi or noir or like spaghetti western, where those are so non-realistic. The whole thing is everyone in the town calls things by sci-fi, Star Wars inspired names.
You could play a slightly futuristic scene or a Star Trek type scene, but unless you're playing or messing with that trope a little bit, it's just a realistic scene set in a realistic future. Unless we're really calling out a difference between that future and our world now, and making that difference the focus of our fun, It's just realistic, or what we think will be realistic.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I always thought of tropes and genre stuff as being...
You think it's the alternate reality, but you have to spin that alternate reality. Why is it fun? Other than why... Because it could be a character-driven scene, but set in space. The old show, Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf is it's a buddy comedy show. It's a sitcom. It just happens to be set in space. I wouldn't even call it an alternate reality. I don't know what the rules are for that is. That is all character-driven. It's not even straight and absurd, because everyone on that show, every character, is absurd. So they're all character-driven. It's a character-driven scene, or it's a character-driven show, just happens to be set a million years in the future in space. That's just the setting. Everyone on that show is got their own game to play, and they play it all at a 10.
All right, let's end it there. You've been listening to Improv Town. If you enjoyed this episode, rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're in the Rhode Island area, don't forget to check out all the great local improv. PIG, the Providence Improv Guild, has shows every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 8. The Contemporary Theater down in Wakefield is currently doing Maestro Improv at 9:30 on Fridays, and the Bit Players do Short Form down in Newport every Friday and Saturday night at the Firehouse Theater, and that's BYOB, so that's always fun. You can also check out Improv Jones, Rhode Island's longest-running improv show, on the first Saturday of every month. That's down at the AS220 Black Box in Providence. Last but not least, there's a new improv theater in town, Wage House, which has shows every Friday night at 8 in Pawtucket. And many of these theaters also offer great improv classes, so don't forget to check those out as well. I'm sure Google can help you find everything you need. See you next time.